I was sent back to the exact day Emma's mother threw a $500 bank card in my face. In my previous life, I had crushed that card under my foot and proudly declared that true love couldn't be bought with money. What did I get in return? A cold look of disgust from her mother and hatred in Emma's eyes. To become worthy of Emma, I sacrificed everything. I studied day and night to earn a full scholarship. After graduation, I joined her family's company as the lowest-ranking employee and worked harder than anyone else. While everyone else worked normal office hours, I pushed myself from early morning until late at night without a break. When the company was on the verge of bankruptcy, I risked my health, secured a game-changing investment, and dragged the business back from the edge of collapse. I truly believed I would become the family's greatest supporter and eventually marry Emma with pride and respect. Instead, I destroyed my own body. Years of endless overtime and constant stress left my health in ruins. The day I collapsed for the last time, the doctor told me I had terminal cancer and only a few days left to live. That was when Emma walked into my hospital room with Ethan, the man she truly loved. There was no concern left in her eyes, only relief. Ethan wrapped an arm around her waist, looked down at me and smiled. "Thanks, Lucas. The company is stable now, and Emma and I are getting engaged next month." Leaning comfortably against him, Emma spoke softly. "Lucas, don't blame me. My mother was right from the beginning. We were never meant to be in the same world." At that moment, I finally realized the cruel truth. I had spent my entire life building their future. I wasn't the hero of my own story. I was just a disposable tool in their love story. Once they had used me completely, they threw me away. But this time, everything would be different. Without a second of hesitation, I grabbed the bank card and flashed the brightest smile I could manage. "Of course, ma'am. I'll disappear from Emma's life completely." For the first time, Olivia Lynn's confident expression cracked. She had probably imagined this conversation countless times, but my reaction wasn't part of any of her plans. I stared at the thin bank card in my hand, and my eyes lit up. It wasn't just a piece of plastic. It was my ticket to a brand new life, and the key to burying my miserable past forever. Afraid she might change her mind, I quickly pulled the card from her fingers and added, "Don't worry. I'll leave Emma, resign from the company, move to another city, change every contact number I have, and make sure she can never find me again for the rest of her life. Will that be enough?" Olivia stood there speechless. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. The words Olivia Lynn had prepared in advance never came out. They got stuck in her throat, and she couldn't say a single thing. She stared at me as if I had suddenly become a completely different person. I understood why she was so shocked. Just yesterday, I had ridden my bicycle through a pouring storm for more than 30 minutes, just to buy Emma a cake she had casually mentioned. By the time I reached her apartment, I was completely soaked, looking like a drenched stray dog. Emma simply rolled down her car window, took the cake, and looked at me with obvious disgust. "Lucas, what happened to you? Look at the state you're in." Sitting behind the wheel was Ethan, one hand resting casually on the steering wheel as he watched me with a fake, mocking smile. In his eyes, I wasn't a rival. I was just a pathetic fool desperately trying to earn the affection of a woman who never loved me. Back then, I didn't even feel angry. All I felt was an endless sadness. I forced myself to smile, reached into my wallet, and pulled out a photograph of Emma and me together. In my previous life, that picture had been my greatest treasure. But this time, without the slightest hesitation, I tore it cleanly in half and dropped both pieces into the nearby trash can. Then I emptied my wallet completely. Every little reminder of Emma, the cheap keychain she had once given me, and every meaningless keepsake I had treasured went straight into the garbage. Looking at Olivia, I said calmly, "There, that should be enough to prove that I'm serious." After leaving the cafe, the first place I went was the bank. I checked my account balance, $715. I let out a long, bitter sigh. Every single dollar in that account represented years of exhausting work from my previous life. It was everything I had managed to save after sacrificing my youth and my health. It was both laughable and heartbreaking. Without hesitating, I withdrew $140 in cash, slipped it into my pocket, and headed to the place I knew better than anywhere else, the headquarters of the Hand Group. I didn't go inside. Instead, I sat quietly on a bench across the street, staring at the massive building. In my previous life, I had considered this place my battlefield. I had poured my blood, sweat, and countless sleepless nights into making it successful. I truly believed I had secured my future here. But looking back now, I finally understood the truth. I had never been irreplaceable. I was nothing more than another disposable part in a giant machine. An idiot who devoted his entire life to sewing someone else's wedding dress while destroying his own future. Just then, my phone vibrated. It was a message from Emma. "Lucas, did my mom come to see you? Please don't listen to anything she says. That's just how she is. Wait for me. I'll come see you this evening so we can talk." Before I could even react, another message arrived. "I bought your favorite fried dumplings. They're still fresh. I'll bring them to you tonight." The moment I read those words, my stomach twisted with disgust. It was the same old trick she always used. First, she'd slap me across the face. suitcase. Then she'd offer me a little kindness, expecting me to forget every wound she had ever caused. I knew exactly what she was doing. She wanted me to believe she cared about me, so I'd keep sacrificing everything for her. In my previous life, I fell for that trick every single time. Whenever Emma showed me even the smallest bit of kindness, I'd melt instantly and work even harder, desperate to prove that choosing me hadn't been a mistake. But this time, all I felt was disgust. I opened her profile, pressed the remove contact button without a second thought, and erased her from my life. Then I walked into a nearby phone store, bought a new number, and took a taxi back to my tiny rented apartment. The room was small, but I had always kept it spotless. Every wall still displayed photos of Emma and me together, and the shelves were filled with books she had given me. Without showing a single emotion, I gathered everything connected to her and threw it into a large trash bag. I ripped every photograph into pieces, burned every love letter, and tossed every cheap little gift she had ever given me into the garbage. Finally, I picked up the last item, a framed picture of her smiling, and dropped it into the bag. The moment it landed inside, an incredible feeling of relief washed over me. It felt as if the chains that had trapped me for years had finally shattered. I opened my laptop and typed my resignation letter. It was short and simple. Dear manager, I, Lucas, voluntarily resign from my position. Please accept this resignation effective immediately. There is no need to process my remaining salary. I didn't care about the money anymore. I just wanted to cut every connection with that company and everyone inside it as quickly as possible. After emailing HR and my supervisor, I shut my laptop, grabbed the suitcase I had already packed, and looked around the room one last time. Inside the suitcase were only a few clothes and my important documents. Everything else could stay behind. It felt like I was finally holding a funeral for the foolish version of myself that had lived here. Dragging my suitcase behind me, I walked out of the apartment without looking back. As I reached the ground floor, I spotted a familiar face. Emma was standing near the entrance, holding a bag of freshly fried dumplings while anxiously looking around. The moment she saw me walking out with a suitcase, she froze before quickly hurrying toward me. Lucas, where are you going? She asked, her voice carrying both annoyance and confusion. I didn't stop. I didn't even look at her. I simply walked right past her. She was still as beautiful as ever, wearing flawless makeup and an elegant smile. But now, whenever I looked at that beautiful face, all I could see was selfishness, lies, and poison hidden beneath it. Lucas, I'm talking to you, she snapped after realizing I was ignoring her. Are you upset because my mom came to see you? I already told you not to listen to her. I'll talk to her myself. And what's with the suitcase? Are you seriously pretending to move out? You're being so childish. Her tone was exactly the same as before, condescending, as if my entire world was supposed to revolve around her feelings. She had never truly understood me. I finally stopped, turned to face her, and looked straight into her eyes. Emma, aren't you curious what your mother offered me? I pulled the bank card from my pocket and held it up in front of her. Your mom gave me $5,000 to walk away from you. The color instantly drained from Emma's face. Lucas, you've got it all wrong. She rushed to explain, but I cut her off before she could finish. No, I understood it perfectly. I accepted the money, and I promised her I'd leave this city and disappear from your life forever. Her face burned with anger and humiliation. She had never expected me to expose the entire deal so openly. In her mind, I should have been too ashamed to even mention it. How could you take her money? She demanded. Lucas, is our love only worth $500 to you? I looked at her as if she had just told the biggest joke I'd ever heard. Love? Emma, did we ever have love? Your so-called love was making me work like a slave for your family's company while you enjoyed luxury cars and romantic dates with another man. Your so-called love was whispering, I love you, to me while secretly planning how to take everything I built after I was gone. My voice stayed calm, but every word struck her like a knife. The color faded from her face until she looked almost ghostly pale. What are you talking about? I never did any of that. Her eyes darted around in panic, unable to meet mine. I let out a cold laugh. Stop pretending, Emma. You know exactly who you are. And now I know too. And as for this $5,000, I don't see it as the price of our relationship. I see it as a tiny portion of the salary your family still owes me after years of working myself to the bone for your company. It's far less than what I deserve, but it's still better than getting nothing. After all, to your family, my life was never worth much anyway, was it? Without waiting for an answer, I picked up my suitcase and walked away. Lucas, wait, she shouted from behind me. Tell me the truth. Did you find something out? I never looked back. I just kept walking. I know everything, I said. I know every secret you've hidden. I know every weakness in your company, and I know exactly how your future ends. I'll watch your family lose everything. I'll watch your empire collapse. And when you're standing in the ruins of everything you built, I'll be there too. Not to save you, just to watch. I flagged down a taxi and headed straight for the airport. The city that had stolen years of my life slowly disappeared behind me. Taking out my new phone, I booked a one-way ticket to Rivergate City. There was no special reason for choosing it. I simply wanted to begin again somewhere my past could never follow me. I wanted to go somewhere warm, somewhere I could finally forget everything and simply rest. From this day forward, I would live only for myself. As for Emma and all the lies surrounding her, they could stay buried in the past where they belonged. My phone vibrated softly. A text had arrived from an unknown number. After reading it, the smile on my face only grew wider. Without replying, I blocked the number and turned my phone off. Outside the airplane window, the sun slowly disappeared below the horizon, painting the sky with brilliant shades of gold and orange. My new life had officially begun. Rivergate City welcomed me with warm ocean air filled with the scent of tropical trees and fresh rain-soaked earth. Hidden among lush green forests, I found a small guest house and decided to stay there. The moment I opened the window, all I could see was endless greenery stretching into the distance. On my first day, I did absolutely nothing. I stayed in bed and slept, from morning until night, and then from night until the next morning. It felt as if I was finally repaying every hour of sleep I had sacrificed in my previous life. When I finally woke up, I felt like I had been reborn. The exhaustion that had settled deep inside my bones had completely disappeared. I turned on my old phone for the first time in days. The second it powered up, hundreds of missed calls and messages flooded the screen. Almost all of them were from Emma and her closest friends. Lucas, where are you? Please call me back. Lucas, are you really going to run away like this? If you have something to say it to my face. Emma is going crazy looking for you. Stop being stubborn and come back. I read every single message with a completely expressionless face. Mixed in with them were several messages from the company's HR manager. Lucas, we've received your resignation, but resigning requires a formal process. Leaving without notice will be treated as job abandonment, and the company may take legal action against you. Another message followed. Mr. Han wants you back immediately. There's an important project that only you can handle. Then came the final warning. If you don't return now, the company will officially terminate your employment, and it could seriously damage your future career. Threats, pressure, empty promises. The same old tricks. I let out a quiet laugh, selected every message at once, and deleted them without the slightest hesitation. Then I turned my attention to the only thing that truly mattered, my future. I opened my laptop and stared at the remaining $500 in my account. Instantly, memories from my previous life flashed through my mind like lightning. My greatest advantage after being reborn wasn't money. It was knowledge. I already knew which companies would dominate the future, which industries would explode, and which investments would create unimaginable wealth. Without hesitating, I invested $200 into a tiny, almost unknown technology company. Right now, nobody cared about it, but I knew that in just 6 months, a revolutionary breakthrough would send its stock price soaring more than 10 times higher. Then I used the remaining $300 to buy as much Bitcoin as I possibly could. Anyone else would have called it a reckless gamble. I called it the beginning of my empire. I'll keep the same AeroFi 2 style and use the story-friendly USD amounts consistently. I closed my laptop, stretched comfortably, and smiled. Now there was only one thing left to do. Sit back and watch my investments grow. For the first time in both of my lives, I was finally going to enjoy living for myself instead of someone else. Over the next month, I completely emptied my mind of the past. I traveled through every corner of Rivergate City's countryside, watched elephants roaming freely, admired colorful peacocks, shared homemade rice wine with the locals, and enjoyed simple meals cooked over wood fires. I wandered through tropical botanical gardens filled with incredible plants I had never seen before. Every day felt peaceful. I even rented a motorcycle and spent hours riding along winding mountain roads with no destination in mind. The warm wind rushed past my ears, carrying away every ounce of stress and exhaustion I had carried for years. I was no longer the old Lucas who lived under endless deadlines and impossible projects. I was no longer the fool who destroyed himself trying to make his girlfriend happy. For the first time, I was simply myself, a free man living for his own happiness. Every once in a while, I turned on my old phone just to see how everyone was reacting. Emma's messages had completely changed. The anger and arrogance were gone, replaced by panic, regret, and desperate apologies. Lucas, I made a terrible mistake. Please come back. Let's start over. There's really nothing between Ethan and me. You have to believe me. That day, he only insisted on driving me home. These past few weeks made me realize I can't live without you. Please come back. I miss you so much. If I had read those messages in my previous life, my heart would have melted instantly. I would have booked the first flight home, run straight to her, and probably apologized even though I had done nothing wrong. But now, all I could do was laugh. She didn't miss me. She missed the loyal tool who solved every problem for her family, worked himself to exhaustion without complaining, and always cleaned up the mess they created. I never replied. Instead, I quietly watched her desperate performance from a distance and enjoyed every second of it. A month later, I flew to Stonebridge City. Life there became even more relaxing. Every day was spent exploring the streets, tasting incredible local food, and enjoying the freedom I had never experienced before. I tried famous hot pot, sampled countless local dishes I had only seen on television in my previous life, wandered through old markets and narrow historic streets, and spent peaceful afternoons drinking tea in quiet parks while watching the world pass by. The slow, comfortable rhythm of life completely healed my exhausted soul. Another month passed before I finally received the phone call I had been expecting. It was from my only real friend at the Han Group, Daniel Zhang. He was a brilliant software engineer, quiet, honest, and one of the few people who had treated me like a human being. In my previous life, when everyone else abandoned me, Daniel was the only person who still checked on me from time to time. "Lucas, where are you right now?" he asked cautiously. "I'm traveling," I replied with a laugh. "What's up? So, you really quit the company?" "Yeah, I resigned." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, Daniel spoke again in a much quieter voice. "Lucas, something really bad has happened at the company." Phone. I casually raised an eyebrow and pretended to be surprised. "Really? What kind of trouble?" "I thought the Han Group was doing just fine." Daniel let out a heavy sigh. "After you left, Mr. Han handed your flagship project over to Ethan." I acted as if I didn't know who he meant. "Emma's friend?" "Yeah, him." Daniel's voice immediately filled with frustration. "That guy's completely incompetent. He doesn't understand the project at all. He tore apart everything you spent months building because he said your ideas were outdated. He kept insisting the project needed a more modern approach." I calmly lifted my teacup. "So, what happened?" Daniel almost groaned. "It was a complete disaster. The very first demo failed miserably. Our biggest partners are furious. They're saying we're completely unprofessional, and now they're considering pulling out of the deal. The entire company is in chaos. Even Mr. Han looks like he hasn't slept in days." I quietly blew across the surface of my tea, hiding the smile slowly appearing on my face. Everything was unfolding exactly the way I expected. That flagship project was supposed to become the Han Group's biggest growth engine for years to come. In my previous life, I had sacrificed countless sleepless nights to build it. Every critical system, every hidden technical detail, and every long-term development plan existed only inside my head. Before leaving, I had intentionally designed several complex sections that only I could fully understand. They looked insignificant, but they were actually the foundation holding the entire project together. Someone with half-finished knowledge like Ethan would never notice them. Desperate to prove he was better than me, he made sweeping changes, and now he was paying the price. Daniel hesitated before speaking again. "Lucas, everyone's searching for you. Emma even came to me today asking if I knew where you were. Could you just come back once?" I let out a quiet laugh. "Go back? For what? To clean up Ethan's mess?" Daniel tried one last time. "But you worked there for years. And Emma..." I cut him off immediately. "My relationship with Emma ended the day I walked away. As for the Han family, whether their company survives or collapses, has absolutely nothing to do with me anymore." Daniel fell silent. "Your relationship ended?" "The day I left," I replied calmly. "So if they ask you about me again, just tell them you don't know anything. And Daniel, don't call me about them again." I ended the call. Daniel was a good friend, which was exactly why I refused to drag him into my personal revenge. Leaning back in my chair, I looked at the evening sky slowly growing darker above me. The more I traveled through Stonebridge City, the calmer my heart became. For the first time in years, I wasn't living for someone else. I was finally living for myself. The hatred from my previous life had felt like a massive boulder crushing my heart for years. But now, that boulder was finally breaking apart, turning into dust and disappearing with the wind. I wasn't living for revenge anymore. I was living to enjoy the priceless second chance life had given me. Revenge was nothing more than an unexpected bonus, a side dish that made this incredible journey even more satisfying. 2 months later, the $20,000 I had invested in the stock market had grown fivefold into $100,000. Without hesitating for even a second, I sold every share and immediately poured the entire $100,000 into a pharmaceutical company that I knew was only weeks away from a revolutionary breakthrough. At the same time, the $30,000 worth of Bitcoin I had bought earlier continued climbing higher every day. Everything was unfolding exactly as I remembered. My investments were making money faster than I could spend it, and for the first time in my life, I never had to worry about money again. Just as I started believing that everyone from my past had finally disappeared from my life, An unexpected visitor shattered my peaceful days. That afternoon I was relaxing in a quiet lakeside town near Crystal Lake and had just found a small Tibetan restaurant for lunch. I had barely sat down when someone familiar walked through the entrance. Someone I recognized, yet somehow no longer knew. It was Emma. She had lost a noticeable amount of weight and looked exhausted. The elegant makeup she always wore was gone, replaced by dark circles and a face filled with endless fatigue. For a brief moment, I wondered how she had managed to find me all the way out here. Then I remembered the influence of the Han family. If they truly wanted to find someone, it was only a matter of time. Besides, maybe a small part of me had always known this day would come. The moment Emma saw me, her eyes lit up with desperate hope. She rushed toward my table, tears already filling her eyes. "Lucas," she whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't stand up. I didn't smile. I simply watched her in complete silence. She stopped in front of me and instinctively reached for my hand, but I calmly pulled it away before she could touch me. My cold reaction left her frozen in place. I looked at her tear-stained face without feeling the slightest emotion. Then I asked in an indifferent voice, "Yes, Miss Han?" The words struck her like lightning. She stared at me in complete disbelief. "Lucas, what did you just call me?" I calmly met her eyes. "Aren't you Miss Han?" She opened her mouth, struggling to answer. I'm Emma." "You're Emma." My expression never changed. "Then why are you here?" At that moment, she finally realized I wasn't pretending. I hadn't changed my attitude to make her regret losing me. I had truly moved on. The tears slowly stopped, replaced by fear and panic. "Lucas," she said with a trembling voice, "the company is in serious trouble. The flagship project completely collapsed. Our partners are pulling out tens of millions of dollars in investment, and they're demanding over $50 million in damages." I simply nodded, picked up my chopsticks, grabbed a piece of perfectly cooked beef, and slowly took a bite. This is excellent. My calm reaction completely shattered her expectations. She had come here believing I would panic, that I would immediately rush back to save the Han Group like I always had before. Instead, I kept enjoying my meal as if her company's collapse meant absolutely nothing to me. She had expected me to see the company's crisis as my own and immediately jump in to fix it, just like I always had before. But I did nothing. I simply sat there in silence, calmly eating my lunch as if she were telling me about a company I had never worked for. Finally, Emma lost control. "Lucas," she shouted, her voice shaking. "Are you even listening to me? The company is going to collapse. My entire family will lose everything." I slowly looked up and met her eyes. "Your family's company is collapsing," I said calmly. "What does that have to do with me?" She froze. "What do you mean? You were part of this company too. That flagship project was your creation. You're the only one who can save it. You're the only one who can save us." I quietly set my chopsticks down and wiped my mouth with a napkin. "Emma, have you already forgotten? First, I resigned. I'm no longer an employee of the Han Group. Second, your mother paid me $500 to disappear from your life forever. I'm simply keeping the promise I made." The color drained from her face once again. She had never imagined I would use that agreement against her so confidently. That was my mother's decision, not mine," she said desperately. "I'll pay you back, not double. I'll pay you 10 times that amount. Please, just come back and help the company one more time." I couldn't help laughing. "Do you honestly think I still care about money like that?" I looked at her with nothing but pity. "You still don't understand, do you? I didn't leave because of the money. I left because I finally got tired of being your fool." Before she could answer, I continued, "Do you know what your biggest mistake is right now? You're standing here begging me for help. Yet you're still acting as if helping you would somehow be an honor for me. Who gave you the right to believe I would definitely save you? Your fake love? Or are you still relying on that pretty face of yours?" Every sentence pierced her heart like a sharpened blade. She had probably never been spoken to like this in her entire life. After all, she had always been the princess everyone adored. Her lips trembled, but for a long moment she couldn't force out a single word. I honestly expected her to explode with anger and walk away. Instead, reality crushed what little pride she had left. She took a deep breath, stepped closer to me, and lowered her head. When she spoke again, her voice was so weak I barely recognized it. "Lucas, I'm begging you, please help me. I'll do anything you ask. Anything." Her entire body was trembling, and her eyes were filled with desperation. I leaned back in my chair, a faint smile slowly spreading across my face. "Anything?" I asked. Emma's body instantly stiffened. She understood exactly what I was implying without me saying another word. Humiliation washed across her face. She bit her lower lip so hard it almost bled, then silently lowered her head and gave the slightest nod. curiosity. I burst into laughter, a loud, carefree laugh that echoed through the restaurant. There was a time when I had been afraid to even touch Emma's hand, worried that the slightest mistake might upset her. And now, she was standing in front of me, willing to bargain with her own dignity just to save her family's company. I looked at her and said calmly, "Words alone aren't enough. If you're serious, you'll have to prove it." I slowly raised one finger and lightly pointed toward my lips. The gesture was small, but the humiliation behind it was unmistakable. Emma's face instantly flushed with anger. She stared at me in disbelief, as if she couldn't recognize the man standing before her. The old Lucas had always obeyed her without question. He would never have dared to ask something that crossed her boundaries. People at nearby tables began glancing over, sensing the growing tension between us. Emma's body trembled slightly. I could see the conflict raging inside her. On one side stood her family's fortune, reputation, and future. On the other stood the last fragments of her pride. I didn't rush her. I simply sat there, watching quietly while she struggled with her decision. After what felt like forever, she finally closed her eyes, leaned forward with trembling hesitation, and briefly pressed her lips against mine. It was a hesitant, reluctant kiss, carrying more desperation than affection. I remained completely still, my eyes open the entire time, silently watching the pain written across her face. When she pulled away, I calmly reached for the napkin beside my plate, wiped my lips, and looked at her without emotion. "Is that all?" I asked quietly. "I told you. If you're going to prove something, it has to be genuine." Emma staggered back as if those words had struck her physically. She looked at me with disbelief. "Lucas, do you really have to do this?" I answered without changing my expression. "You're the one asking for my help. I'm not asking for yours. If you're here to negotiate, then understand one thing. You don't get to set the terms." She closed her eyes for a long moment, her shoulders rising and falling with a shaky breath. Finally, she lowered her head. "Okay." There wasn't a trace of confidence left in her voice. I stood up from my seat and walked toward the exit. Emma silently followed a few steps behind me, like someone who had completely lost her direction. Outside, a powerful wind swept through the small town, sending her hair and clothes fluttering in every direction. I didn't take her to a luxury hotel or anywhere extravagant. Instead, I walked through the old streets until I found one of the oldest and cheapest hotels in town. Standing in front of the worn-out building, I pushed open the door and stepped inside. The hotel room was tiny, old, and filled with cheap, worn-out furniture. The moment Emma walked inside, she frowned in obvious disgust. She couldn't even hide the look on her face. I casually sat down on a chair that looked like it might break at any second, crossed one leg over the other, and smiled. The eldest daughter of the Hahn family is probably used to presidential suites. A place like this must be torture for you. She didn't say a word. Instead, she walked over to the window, turned her back to me, and stared into the empty streets outside. I ignored her completely and pulled out my phone to check my investments. Just as I had predicted, the pharmaceutical company had announced its breakthrough, sending the stock soaring day after day. My $100,000 investment had already grown to $300,000. Watching those numbers climb across the screen filled me with a satisfaction that revenge could never match. Building my own future felt far more rewarding than watching someone else's fall. Before I knew it, darkness had settled over the town. Neither of us bothered to turn on the lights, leaving the room dim and silent. Emma was still standing by the window without moving. Finally, I spoke. "Come here." Her body shivered before she slowly turned around and walked toward me. In the fading light, I couldn't clearly see her face, but her eyes were impossible to miss. They were completely empty, as if every ounce of hope had already disappeared. She stopped in front of me. I stood up and walked toward her one step at a time. Instinctively, she backed away until her shoulders touched the cold wall. I looked into her eyes for a long moment before speaking. "Emma, do you know how many times I dreamed about this day? I used to imagine winning your heart. I imagined you'd finally choose me, that you'd cry for me, beg me not to leave." I paused and gave a faint smile. "But now that you're standing right in front of me, I don't feel anything." I took a single step back, putting space between us again. Emma stared at me in complete disbelief. Then I reached into my wallet, pulled out every dollar I had in cash, about $1,000, and threw the bills onto the floor in front of her. "Take the money," I said coldly, "then get out." My voice carried no emotion. "You really believed that if you sacrificed a little of your pride, I'd rush back and become the same fool who worked himself to death for your family? You've always thought far too highly of yourself and far too little of me. I didn't bring you here because I wanted anything from you. I brought you here so you'd finally understand something. In your eyes, what you were offering was an enormous sacrifice. But in my eyes, it wasn't worth a single dollar." Those words shattered the last piece of strength she had left. Shock flashed across her face, followed by humiliation and finally complete despair. Slowly, she collapsed onto the floor, buried her face in her hands, and broke into heartbreaking sobs. I simply stood there and watched without saying another word. There was no hatred left inside me, and no pity either. Everything happening to her now was nothing more than the result of the choices she had made herself. This was nothing more than the consequence of her own choices. I turned around, opened the door, and walked out without looking back. By the time I reached the hotel entrance, Emma's desperate scream echoed through the night. "Lucas, why are you doing this to me? Why?" I never stopped walking. Without turning around, I answered in a calm, emotionless voice, "You chose this road yourself, so don't regret it now." Those were the last words I gave her. Then I walked straight into the darkness of the night without looking back even once. Behind me, her broken cries slowly faded into the distance until they disappeared completely. For the first time in both of my lives, I felt no anger, no hatred, and no desire to prove anything. The chapter called Emma Hahn was finally over. The future waiting ahead of me was far brighter than the past I had just left behind, and I had no intention of ever turning around again. That's it for today's video. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.